We're going to cover here the 6 critical components that you have to understand and develop to be an elite or develop yourself into a professional pitcher. This is going to be a key part of the TopVelocity methods. So we're going to show you how at TopVelocity we develop these core principles or components of developing elite pitchers. I'm going to give you a general overview of each one, and ideally coming here to TopVelocity into our 3x Velocity camps allows you to go in depth into the education and the programming and the training to apply this to reach your goals of becoming an elite or professional pitcher. So the first thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at biomechanics, pitching mechanics. So that's the movements that an elite pitcher performs. And we have the empirical evidence of that, meaning not opinions, not anecdotal. We have actual case studies that we've collected the information that shows these are the elite components of professional pitchers, and we know how to measure them, and we know how to measure them for you so you can see what separates you from the elite level within those components. So we're going to talk a little bit about them, how important they are, how we train and develop them, because that's a critical component if you're going to develop yourself into an elite pitcher. Then we'll go into some mobility training. That's going to be another key component of a professional pitcher, is developing elite mobility. Elite pitchers typically have good mobility. And that what it does is it gives them the ability to get into the elite positions that you learned in the biomechanics or the pitching mechanics of professional pitchers. So we need good mobility training to support that. Then we're going to go into strength training. So we need to understand, what is strength? How is strength different from speed and from power? And how do we optimally develop that to support those biomechanics? Everything really goes back to the biomechanics, is how well does it support what we're trying to do on the mound? That's our third component. Let's go to our fourth component. It's going to be speed training. We're going to go over what is speed training, how's that different from strength training, or even power training, and how do we optimally train for speed? Pretty important when we know high velocity or professional pitchers are high velocity pitchers, and velocity is another name for speed, so it's obviously a very important component. So we'll go over how we train that. Power training, we'll go over what is the difference of it, and what's the difference between strength and power, speed and power, and how important is it, and how do we train it, and what's the difference between training for power and training for strength. Not a lot of people know that difference. Not a lot of people are training for power, specifically elite power that professional pitchers have. So we're going to go over what it takes to train for that elite power. Then for our fifth component, we're going to have, or actually that's our sixth component, we're going to go into pitch development. How to basically not just throw your fastball, but how to spin your breaking pitches, how to throw your off-speed pitches, how to command and locate and make critical adjustments to develop elite pitches. Because not only do elite pitchers throw hard, but they throw with command and they throw with good spin. So we're going to go over how we develop the good spin and pitch strategies to be an elite pitcher. So make sure we covered them right. That was biomechanics, that was mobility training, that was strength training, speed training, power training, and pitch development. That's our 6 components right there. And well, let's get started. Let's take a dive into our elite biomechanics. So the biomechanics of a professional pitcher, there's a lot to it. I'm not going to cover all of it here. I'm just going to give you some basic principles, and I'm going to go into the tools that we use to develop the biomechanics. So basically, biomechanics is how you're driving your car. So think of your body as your car, and the biomechanics are that you're the driver in the car. How are you telling your car to move? That's really what the biomechanics are. So here's the thing, you can only move the car based on its specifications. So if the car can only turn the wheel so far, you can only be able to turn it that far. If the engine can only accelerate so fast, you can only be able to accelerate it that fast. So if you're trying to improve things in your biomechanics that are more dealing with the car's limitations, then that's where we go into the things that we're going to cover after this. Mobility, strength, speed, power, the whole thing. So biomechanically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get more force through the ground. We're trying to pump it up to our body. And we pump it up in 2 ways. We pump it up through drives, extension movements, pushing movements, and we pump it up through spinning and rotational movements. And it's how we use those together, kind of like a whip, to get the best end result, most speed at the end. and control as well. So we're gonna lift, we're gonna use gravity, we're gonna fall, we're gonna load the drive leg because it's the only leg on the ground for about 3/4 your delivery. Once the drive leg gets in a linear position, we're gonna learn to open and drive. So basically we take linear energy and we power it into the rotational forces. This will delay because we start to use counter movements, just like the whip. We counter the end against the beginning where the forces are generated, and then it starts to receive those forces. So it's pretty much going force multipliers into speed multipliers, and that's where the hips are open, the shoulders are closed. That's our first counter movement we call hip to shoulder separation. And then from there, that should unload or release the trunk into acceleration, and the arm will lay back. That's another counter movement, trunk going forward, arm going back. And then it'll finally pump into the arm. There's a lot of challenges to that. You have to have the strength and power of the lower half. You have to have the stability at landing to allow the counter movements to build. So there's some things that we like to use here. When we're teaching how to challenge the movement and make it a more dynamic movement and not just an arm movement, we use the med balls. The heavier ball with 2 hands allows us to put more of a load, not on the arm, on the trunk and the legs, and make them work a little harder. When you grab a baseball, it really doesn't challenge you like that. So this is a great way to get out of the arm and get into what we call the kinetic chain. So we use the med balls for that. We have a lot of drills for it. The stride accelerator, another great tool to teach the lower half, give you the depth, the angles of the shins, the stability from these positions to accelerate the upper body. Great tool for that. We use the sled, the TopVelocity sled, to load the lower half and help us get more explosive, develop more power and better driving movements of the lower half. There's a bunch more little intricate things, like the king of the hill is a force plate that tells us, gives an indication when we're pushing, when we're driving, the timing, the other great tool, and many more. But we use all this to teach the movements and these core principles that we take from case studies, and then we also measure them. We use tools like Pro Player AI. It's an app that will help us measure these points, and we know elite players or elite pitchers get into certain positions at certain times, at certain acceleration speeds and sequencing, and we got to make sure you're doing that. So we'll measure that. We'll actually give you a report on findings on how well you're doing that, and then that gives us something to work on and remeasure to see our progress. So let's move on to mobility. All right, mobility training. So we do things like foam rolling to mash and help break up the fascial tissue, help the muscle to relax a little bit. Then we go into stretching. So we have routines that'll take you through the whole body. You go through different types of stretching. We like to use band stretching, working on different areas of the body, right? Hip extension here, quad, okay? And then even into the Rotex, which Rotex is like it's a total body stretch in different positions, okay? And working through these positions and these routines with the Rotex, it allows us to go from a more segmented approach of mobility with the band work to a total body approach. And these are in daily routines that we apply through each segment of the body, making sure that not only do we have mobility, but we have the ability to get in good posture and stabilize and be able to get into the good stable positions in the pitching delivery. So you're just gonna literally go one joint at a time as you work through. And it's also an assessment tool. You'll see the days when you'll know your hips are tight, and you know how that's gonna affect you on the mound, and the importance of you maybe spending more time there to get that to a better place where you can get it on the mound and you're not in a position where you're not going to create the movement you want. So this is all laid out in our training as well, and this is just basically a good general overview of mobility. I'm sure you've heard of strength training. Strength training is any form of lifts or exercises where you're adding weight and you're challenging your ability to move that weight and apply force to it. So like squatting, deadlifting, pressing, pulling, lunging. These are all strength training lifts. The more challenges is understanding the difference between power and strength, and we'll get in that with power. But in the emphasis of strength is really stability. It's in going back to our biomechanics where we can stabilize those elite positions. It's going to give us the better ability to apply them. So if we don't have the strength or stability and we don't have the mobility to get us in the best positions to apply those strength, it's going to compromise our ability to move well on the mound. So the focus of our strength training is to make sure that we're building good pelvic stability. All of our joint stability is improving, our core stability, our upper body stability. This is all critical to becoming an elite mover and also staying healthy. There's a lot of health in strength development, but I don't want you to confuse strength with power or even speed training. And you need to make sure you're training all three of these. So let's move on to speed. All right, speed training. Speed training is, speed and agility, anaerobic conditioning. So it's basically training activation. It's that brain to movement time, that signal. How quickly, when you tell your body to do something, how quickly does it act to do it? Obviously, we want to be very quick, specifically as pitchers, as elite pitchers, because the delivery takes less than 1 second. And it's the fastest human movement ever recorded in the laboratory. The upper body speeds have been recorded up to 7,000 degrees per second. So to create those kind of speeds, you have to have the ability to activate really quickly. So in our speed, our strength, or our speed or anaerobic conditioning, we're conditioning or training the body to be quick activators, like here in our hurdles, ladders, similar stuff you've probably seen before, but it's important how we program this with our strength and our power. They have to work together so we get the great end result, which we're going to look at the end of the video. We're going to look at the metrics that we need and the results we're trying to create. So there's a lot of exercises out there and a lot of programs out there, but are they getting results? We're going to talk about at the end. Are you getting results? And this is how you know how you're getting results. So that's speed training. Let's take a look at power training. Power training. Power training is critical for becoming an elite athlete, an elite high velocity pitcher. What's the difference between power and strength is power is your ability to activate your strength quickly, right? So if we look at, we said the pitching delivery is less than 1 second. If we're taking more than a second to get off our peak amount of force, say in a deadlift, I'm trying to get to my peak level of force, but it's taking longer than a second, I'm not going to use a lot of that force or that force production in my movement or in the pitching delivery. So I need to train the ability to activate that quicker. And that's where we get into Olympic lifting. So Olympic lifting does two things. It not only it challenges us to get our forces off quicker, but it also challenges us to do it in more complex movements, which is like pitching. So when we throw, we have a lot of things going on. We got the lower half driving and stabilizing. We have the upper half countering, receiving energy, transferring energy through many different sequence of counter movements. So it's a very complex movement. So yeah, we want to develop power in our body, but we also want to develop the ability to move it through a complex system of movements to get a very high end result of speed and acceleration. So that's what the Olympic lifts do, like the power clean. The power clean isn't just like the deadlift, one movement, a simple hinge, say, movement. It's a series of movements. It's a deadlift. It's like a hip thrust. Then it's a clean or a jump. Then it's a rack, catch and stabilize. And therefore, you're training your body to sequence all your joints to accelerate forces up through your body as quickly as you can, similar how you perform when you're throwing or hitting. So this is taking your strength training, your speed training, pulling it together to get a complex power movement, just like we do on the mound as an elite pitcher, especially if you want to be an elite professional pitcher. So this is our Olympic approach to power training. Now let's go into pitch development. Finally, when you've got your biomechanics, your pitching mechanics elite, you've gotten to elite levels of athleticism, and we're going to look more into that at the end. We go into pitch development. So we have everything coming through well. We're pronating well, which is a key part to spin, and we use something like the clean fuego balls to teach us how our ball is moving. So it teaches us things like spin axis, basically the axis of rotation. It teaches us the position that the ball is in the axis of rotation. For example, if I'm going to throw a fastball with a good vertical break, I want to make sure my spin axis is not much more than 130. If 12 o'clock's here, not much more than 130 on the right side, same on the other side. so I can keep that good vertical break. If not, it gets too horizontal and then I lose vertical break. If I'm trying to get horizontal break, I want to make sure I'm more to the 3 o'clock spot. If I'm trying to throw a hard braking slider, I want to make sure it's a pronated slider. So I want to learn how to get the ball slightly turned to the side. I want to throw it like a fastball and feel that pronation kick in at the end, that pronation acceleration that spins a real good slider. And a cutter is just a smaller version of that. Or if I'm learning a curveball, I want to get the face of the clean fuego ball to me. Learning that end over end, good curveball. Change up, same way. I want to learn basically how to slow it down, get it less than 10 miles an hour than my fastball. Maybe get some arm side run with it, meaning pronate it very early. So all the things we'll work on. We also can put you through our pitch analytics system that looks at your profiles and comes up with the best pitch strategies and pitch grips for your profiles and where you'll be most effective with them. So this is really the icing on the cake when you have really developed everything and you're really ready to go off and compete as a professional pitcher. Before we're done though, I want to look at how we measure and analyze this and track our progress, because that's the most important part. If you're just applying all this, but you don't know how well you're doing it, and ultimately you don't know where you're trying to get with it, and on top of that, you don't know how well you're even moving through it, it's going to be very, the probability that you'll become a professional pitcher is going to be pretty much determined on your genetics. It's going to be hard for you to have much more of an influence than just what God gave you. So if you're sitting here tracking it, you will have a lot more influence to, peak your abilities, reach your ultimate peak, and ultimately go above your genetic potential. So let's look into our evaluation system. So we measure everything so we can track everything. We have, through empirical evidence, a gold standard of 100 miles per hour. We have the mobility measurements, the performance measurements like speed, strength, power, and the biomechanics. If you want the best chance of becoming an elite pitcher, you need to get as close as you can to these metrics. We also have a ranking system through our training to keep you motivated. At the end of the day, the elite, the gold standards at our pro level, but you have level 1, 2, and 3 to push through. Most guys, the majority guys at level 2 are already 90 plus. So this gives you some motivation to work towards in your training while you also are focused on the gold standard you're trying to achieve. But what we do is we first evaluate you and we measure you through this system here so we can see where you are and how far away you are. We also even use artificial intelligence to say specifically what's holding you specifically back, meaning you might not have to get all these things. There's some more specific things for you if you want to be a little bit more focused in you reaching your goals. But this is the key to making sure that you're doing your best to almost guarantee your ability to be a professional pitcher, is you're measuring and tracking your progress to the system. If you're not doing that, you're just guessing. So this is the best way to almost get the guarantee and at least be able to reverse engineer your goals and dreams in baseball to where you are today and give you the vision that what it would take for you to reach those goals and dreams. So I hope this helps. If you have any comments, if you want to learn more about the Top Velocity camps or the 3X Velocity Camp, topvelocity.net/3x/camp, and would love to hear from you.